In this video, I'm going to talk about how to answer 10 interview questions in job interviews with Meta. And as you'll see next, the approach is slightly different than what I usually recommend for these FANG companies. Okay, so before we begin, keep in mind these are behavioral type of questions. I'm also going to recommend you approach them in the STAR format if you can, at least when you prepare your interview. And the sharper your answers, the better. Right? First question, tell me about the time when you made a hard decision to sacrifice short-term gain for something that would create long-term value for the business. Right? What was the outcome, and knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently? All right, so a time when you sacrifice short-term gain for long-term results. Right? And to answer this question, I would refer you to Meta's core values, one of them being focus on long-term impact, right? So we emphasize long-term thinking that encourages us to extend the timeline for the impact we have rather than optimizing for near-term wins. We should take on the challenges that will be the most impactful, even if the full results won't be seen for years. Right? In other companies, this is simply called testing for your ownership with these interview questions, right? So I believe the reasoning on why these answers get asked should be quite clear. I also linked them to Meta's core values, and I also talked a little bit about ownership, right? Like, what's your best story to showcase ownership and your ability to prioritize long-term value for your business department? Depends on the role that you're specifically interested in, right? The second question I'd like to talk about here would be, what's the most challenging work you ever did? Right? A challenging project or a challenging initiative or a challenging program in some roles. This is a pretty classic interview question, and if I may just translate this question to you, I think it's going to be far easier for you to answer it. Okay, so what's your best story that you prepared for this job interview? What's the most representative story that you really want them to remember you for after this interview? Right? So this would be what they're actually interested in. Of course, it could be a starting point of a conversation. They could dive deeper into these things. But on the same reasoning that I used previously for ownership, Meta has another cultural attribute, if you want to call it like this, build awesome things. Okay, so we push ourselves to ship things that are not just good, but are also inspiring. We've already built products that are useful to billions of people. In our next chapter, we'll focus more on inspiring them as well in everything we do. Right? So when you answer this with your best story, you should keep in mind this cultural attribute of Meta's willing to build awesome things. So what is awesome to you that could also interest them for this job interview, right? So needless to say, it's a careful balancing act between the role that you're applying for and simply selling yourself for the purpose of this job interview. So this should be clear, I hope, right? Number 3, the interview question here would be, if there's one thing you wish you'd improve, what would it be? Right, so a seemingly tricky interview question, and if I may just translate this to you as I did previously, what's your weakness? Okay, so they're basically asking you what's your weakness. And in my experience, interviewers at Meta are down-to-earth, smart interviewers that are not super likely to accept generic reasons such as public speaking or even turning a positive into a negative. They're really looking to see, hey, what do you think? What's where you should improve here? And if you want an extreme approach, it could also be something directly from the job description that you're applying for. Some people prefer to address the elephant in the room this way. If there's one specific thing you lack experience with in the job description, and it's obvious from your CV also, like, and you expect this to come up here in your interview, you could also bring it forward, right, when being asked about your weakness and talk about it, right? But long story short, I would definitely recommend you to brainstorm for a number of weaknesses, even have 3, have backups in case they're not happy with with the first one you give them. But all in all, again, it's notice here again the importance of reading between the lines of the actual question, understanding what they're actually asking you about, right? A superficial candidate will, if there's one thing you'd wish to improve, what would it be? They would simply talk about something super generic, vague. They would never use a specific story. They would never sell themselves or on anything using this. They would just duck the question, or use turning a positive into a negative, a positive into a negative, and so on, right? Number 4 question here. Describe a time when you faced a conflict inside your team or disagreement, or basically a disagreement with your boss, right? So basically they are looking to test for your interpersonal skills. These questions will be asked in most companies. I would say in vast majority of companies, they will test for interpersonal skills. No one wants to work with people who really don't like working with others, with arrogant people, stuff like that. But even further, if we refer to Meta's core values, they have be direct and respect your colleagues. Right? We create a culture where we are straightforward and willing to have hard conversations with each other. At the same time, we are also respectful, and when we share feedback, we recognize that many of the world's leading experts work here. Okay, so I believe this should be straightforward to give you a direction as to what are the best answers tend to look like here. Straightforward, direct, but not arrogant, of course. Here, also, if I may just give you a little bit of advice here, what some candidates tend to do would be to ask AI to give them an example for inspiration, then they simply clone that or adjust that, and basically that's not the way to go, simply because it's going to be generic and it's not going to sound good, right? So I would highly encourage you to think about something unique, something you actually went through. I'm sure you had to give some tough feedback to someone at some point. I hope you had to have some serious conversation with your boss at some point in time. And even if you put it in the star format, I think they will appreciate it even more, right? What you should be careful of, I mean, these questions are super effective to spot negative candidates, negative people who tend to put the blame on someone, or on the company or whatnot. So try to, showcase that you are straightforward and willing to have hard conversations, but at the same time, you aren't a super pessimistic or negative type of person, right? This would be my recommendation. And on the same lines of interpersonal skills, number 5 here, how does teamwork come into play in your current role? Okay, so how do you contribute to a team? Right, so here it's very much depending on the type of role you're applying for. You know that at Meta there are 2 tracks, individual contributor and manager level tracks, and I believe the way you go around answering it would very much differ on the track that you're interested in. For example, a manager level role will have to, for a manager level role, this will be the bread and butter of what they actually do. This is subject matter expertise type of question. And of course, you would want to talk about your successes leading teams and influencing teams successfully and driving outcomes as a manager, right? For a individual contributor role, the question still makes sense, quite a ton actually, even if you're applying for a more junior type role, even if you're applying for a software engineer if you want, but your ability to influence, or your ability to play a constructive role in your team is something that you can expect they will be highly interested to hear about, right? So a time when you made the difference inside your team for your outcome, right? So when you, for instance, if you're talking about, if you're applying for a software development engineer, you won't be expected to showcase your manager level skills, as a candidate. You'll be expected to be screened on your specific subject matter expertise as a software development engineer with some interpersonal skills to help your colleagues to be useful for the context of your team. You could even pitch it with, if you remember at the beginning, I talked about prioritizing long-term impact versus short-term success, you can pitch it with ownership type examples. When you own the project, you felt like, hey, this is my thing, I should really take ownership of this thing and get it done, and this is how you contribute to the success of the operation. This is how you showcase yourself as a team player. There are an infinite number of possibilities on how you can contribute to the success of the team. You just have to think about what is the most representative one, and importantly, again, given the role that you're applying for. Right? Manager level roles will have different types of for individual contributor roles. A software engineer will have a different example from a PM. Right? So this is my point here. And this question can also be blended into many other formats, such as tell me about the cross-functional collaboration, or describe a time when you influenced an outcome, or share examples of how you manage difficult stakeholders, if you want. These are all, on the teamwork and working cross-functionally, generally speaking, right? And again, this blends with the interpersonal type of skills, which I talked about previously, a conflict with someone, right? Number 6, give me an example of a calculated risk you've taken where speed was critical. What was the situation and how did you handle it? What steps did you take to mitigate the risk? What was the outcome? And knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently? Right? So give an example of a calculated risk and a speed, when speed was essential. Right? So for this, I would refer you again to Meta's core values, specifically to move fast. Right? So we build and learn faster than anyone else. Acting with urgency, we don't wait until next week to do something we could do today. We continuously work to speed up our highest priority initiatives by methodically removing barriers that get in the way. It's about moving fast in one direction together as a company and as individuals, right? So move fast, break things. If you remember this expression, right? So a time when you calculated this, you took a calculated risk of speed was critical, right? So usually when speed is critical, you would talk about decisions which were not critically important, right? And here an example I like to give, a critically important, if you want, decision would be at least for someone like me, would be a wisdom tooth extraction. Like, I really have to take the time to think about it, whether I want to take it out or not. It's not as a 1 minute decision, right? Whereas if I receive some general broad requirements for an initiative and I'm required to provide a bid on that, I could put together something quite quickly, knowing that speed is of essence and the importance of this decision. This decision is a reversible one, right? That to place a bid on a project on some estimation. You could say it takes 3 months on the specifications you have so far, but you could change your mind later on. This actually happens all the time, right? So the key here is to understand that when speed is critical, the decision that you're taking is not necessarily a critical one as well, right? Because the more critical the decision is, or the more important the decision is, the more time you have to take to invest into finding the best possible approach here, right? This would be an introduction, if you want, on dealing with ambiguous situations and decision-making in ambiguous situations. Again, wildly differs according to the role that you're applying for, but this should give you enough insight on how to get started with these things. Number 7 here, how do you handle setbacks? Okay, so what does this question actually mean? If I had to translate this, tell me about the time when you failed, or how do you fail, if you want. It could even come as a rather broad question. Now, why would someone ask you this question in a job interview? A number of reasons. Probably the most interesting of them is to see if you prepared for the actual interview, because people don't find it easy to talk about failure from the first shot, right? And I would even argue it will take you 3 attempts to find a proper failure from your career, right? Then the second reason would be that some people never agree that they fail, right? So they say something on the lines, I never fail, I only learn, right? But still, it's not as easy as that. We all fail, and we should agree with that. And the third reason, this actually blends quite well in the third reason why they would ask you for a failure story, is that to see what you learned from it. So the better the learnings from your failure story, the better your score with your interview question, right? So failure stories is something I highly encourage you to prepare in job interviews with high-performing companies. Okay, this was number 7. Number 8, what's your most recent invention? Okay, seemingly straightforward question, and for this I would like to again refer you to Metascore values. We live in the future. Okay, so let's build the future of work that we want with an in-person focus designed to support a strong, valuable experience for our people who have chosen to work from the office, and a thoughtful and intentional approach to where we invest in remote work. This also means being early adopters of the future products we build to help people feel present together wherever they are. Right, so we live in the future. Again, what's your most recent invention, as I studied? So when you pitch something, what's your most recent invention? And by the way, it doesn't have to be the most recent one, but the most impactful one that you prepared for the interview, by the way. You would want to talk about something that could be interesting for them, to sell yourself as the most interesting candidate they'd want to work with, and if you receive this question, you hear it for the first time, it will take you a bit of time to find the best possible answer of an invention that would suit well your job interview. But as soon as you prepare it in advance and you maybe take into account the score value at Meta, then you get a better sense on what could sell best with this regard. Right, so most recent invention, straightforward. Number 9 here, why Meta? Okay, so why Meta? Obviously, it's a quite commonly asked question in interviews with Meta. I would argue that it's even more asked these days than the elevator pitch, simply because the elevator pitch no longer makes that much sense. And when trying to answer why Meta, I would warn you against over-complimenting them. You're a great company with exceptional people. I really like your core values. I'm excited about your overall business. I'm excited about the CEO. I'm excited about everything. And that's it. So when you go around why Meta, you should also talk about what's in for you for these things. Even say that, saying a friend recommended you is, of course, always also complimenting them, but it starts getting a little bit to also what's in for you, because a friend of mine whom I worked previously and we were made together a great team recommended you, then this would also be something that could be interesting for them, right? Or it could be a natural progression given that CV you have, or you're excited about the product, you're going to be working there because you previously had specific similar experiences, right? This could be only some of the reasons you would want to join Meta, but usually try to find something genuine, and preferably not the money. You could even go as far as, also the salary is quite tempting, on the condition you know how to pitch these things, of course. But I found that there is value in investing a bit of time in preparing your why Meta for a job interview as well. And finally, number 10 interview question that I believe it's a good idea to prepare in job interviews with Meta is, how do you learn? Okay, so how do you learn? It's a question, that's used to get asked a lot by HR in the past, because they would want to screen people who are superficial learners, in the sense that they would only learn from one source. I know that guy from YouTube, and I follow him for 20 years, and that's it. Also, you would want to showcase a variety of sources for your learning experiences. You would want to also keep it interesting. Even if you showcase a learning experience that's not directly linked with the role that you're applying for, you must sell yourself. on something there. For example, you could sell yourself as a quick learner, right? There was a core value here. We build and learn faster than anyone else. Okay, so if you showcase yourself as a quick learner, that's even far superior as to when coming up with I always like to learn and never stop learning. And if you even ask my previous manager, he said I'm a great learner, and with this generic type of answers. So try to come up with something interesting and try to be specific as possible when talking about this experience, even if the question is how do you learn, right? So seemingly open-ended question that is usually getting asked for more senior executive types of roles, simply because they would want to see if you understand exactly why they ask you such a question, even if it's open-ended, right? So they would want to ask you this because they are still interested in a specific experience, or even 3 experiences if you want, but they would want to see if you are able to listen carefully during the job interview to the actual question getting asked. And throughout this list, I've done my best to both to translate you some of these questions, both to link them with Meta's core values, in a bit to help you to understand how these behavioral interviews are getting scored and what some of the best candidates bring to the table. Okay, so I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.